Thank you very much for this very honorary invitation to address this audience in a holy moment for Pontic civilization, the celebration of 100 years, the anniversary rather of 100 years of these tragic days which happened then. I originate in the prefecture of Messenia, Meligala, where a major massacre took place in 1944. It is interesting because I have seen how this generation behaves, the generation that suffered this massacre and their children. The generation never speaks about this. Why? The events are so tragic, the events they experience, that they don't want to talk about them. They don't want to touch upon them. Their children are children that have suffered from these events. And yet, they too do not speak about these events. The third generation, we, are the ones who come and try to look into what happened. And this explains, to a great extent, why only in the 90s the Hellenic Parliament started examining the issues of genocide. In 1994, Law 2193 established the commemoration day for Pontus Greeks. In 96, another day was established for the commemoration of Armenians from Turkey. And in 98, the Hellenic Parliament passed the Law 2645, to which I'm going to refer mainly. We have another recognition of genocide in 2004 with another law which established the 27th of January as the commemoration day of Greek Jews who were killed during the Second World War. The interesting thing is that Law 2645 of 94, which established a commemoration day for the Greeks in Asia Minor, although it was unanimously approved during its passing without any reservation. On the contrary, in 2001, when it was a presidential decree draft was passed, it faced serious problems and was an object of dispute. This political dispute led to raising the question to what extent historical events which took place in Asia Minor at the beginning of the 20th century and which saw their peak in August and September 1922 constitute a genocide of the Hellenism in Asia Minor, or whether, I draw your attention on that, are the fatal consequence of a war which had many violent events, and at some point Greeks were lost. The objective today for me is to speak about this. I'm sure that many people have talked about the Convention on Genocide of 1948. It was not in force during that time. It was not in force in the 1910th. Therefore, it did not pertain to the genocide of Armenians, Pontus Greeks, or Greeks in the coast of Asia Minor, and it cannot be used retroactively. But it is the only text which defines explicitly the notion of genocide. Moreover, as mentioned by the International Tribunal in The Hague, the principles in this covenant are recognized by civilized nations, that they are binding even if there is no contractual obligation. Consequently, this convention establishes an ecumenical principle, the prohibition of genocide, which was in force, of course, before 1948. And this is a customary law. You do not expect to see the text that says it is prohibited. It is true as a rule, as a customary rule. If we go back to the text before 1948, we have the Hague Convention, which included a term, the so-called Martens term, which established that until a fuller code about the rules of war is established, the contracting parties, the states, should confirm that there might be cases for populations not at war, where the people and the states can create problems for and transgress or violate what is considered as customs by civilized nations, philanthropy, and the demands of public conscience. Therefore, already in 1907, there was this perception that there are some other rules that protect the civilians from the warring parties and are based on the philanthropy, the demand for public conscience, and customs. This was made clearer in 1915 when the the powers of the Entente condemned the massacres of the Armenians by the Ottoman government and warned that due to the new crimes of Turkey against humanity and against civilization, all members of the Turkish government should be held liable, and the officers participating in these massacres. During the Paris Peace Convention in 1919, there was a special commission held up on the initiative of a Greek professor, Nikolaos Politis, and it was proposed to adopt a new category of war crimes that constitute serious violations of human law, which may not be foreseen by law, but which are serious violations of rules and customs as regards the way the warring parties behave. And based on the report by Politis in the Convention of Sèvres, we had the Articles 226 and 230, where there was an explicit obligation of Turkey, which was adopted, to regulate as regards the parties which participated in the massacres. Therefore, this is a photography of the Armenian genocide. And this is why, later on, the Young Turks prosecuted 7 high-ranking officials. The British imprisoned 118 people in Malta who were about to flee, because they were about to flee. The Ottoman government held some trials, condemned some low-ranking officials, and one of them was executed. In fact, out of 130 officials who were referred for violation, not of international law, but of Ottoman laws, which means that within the Ottoman Empire, there was this perception that what was happening was an extreme move of violation of rules of humanitarian law. Out of this 130, apart from one who was condemned to death, the others escaped following the tragic events that followed the end of the First World War. Now, let's go and see what we have here. I'm not referring to the Pontiac genocide. I'm referring to the events in Asia Minor. I will not characterize them right away. We have another element. On the 3rd of September 1922, a week after the entrance of Turks in Smyrna, Nureddin, the governor, issued his order number 5. Based on this, he gave the explicit order to arrest all people 18 to 45 years of age who were men. In fact, they arrested all people from 16 to 55. They were sent to the labor battalions, Melet Aburu, and they were executed to the great majority. So the arrest and extermination of the whole male population of a group is a means par excellence for a genocide. We are in the Stavros Niarchos Cultural Foundation in the period after the Asia Minor disaster. In all this area, down to Piraeus, there were tents with people there, where people coming from Asia Minor lived. This was the other part of my family. And Fridtjof Nansen, representative of the League of Nations, came through this area, where in October 1922 sent the following document to the League of Nations. And he tells them, I have visited the tents. There are no males there. Attention. We're talking about the time where the man was the head of the family. The women did not work. There were no men, just women, children, and very elderly people who are dressed in summer clothes. It is a matter of time when winter comes, and fatally, they will start dying one after the other. So the extermination of the male population of a group, a population group, is an act of genocide, is a genocidal act. With the same decision, all families of Greeks and Armenians from the coast of Asia, of Smyrna, were called upon and ordered to abandon the area from the 3rd to the 17th of September. All those not living were to put to exile. Where did they go? They went to the labor battalions. They were sent to the labor battalions. I was impressed some years ago when I was writing a book about Greek-Turkish relations. I tried to find out how many came back in 1922 from Asia Minor. Based on the data that we have from the Smyrna, the city of Smyrna, approximately 150,000 hostages were taken. I'm using the term hostages, not prisoners. It was the soldiers who were prisoners. According to the Greek army, there were 52,000 people missing after the Asia Minor disaster. 38,000 were mentioned by Turkey in October 1922. Turkey had said that they had arrested them, so 38,000 were alive. How many came back to Greece? 18,541 people came to Greece. I repeat, 18,541 people returned to Greece. Out of those, 320 were hostages, which means that the 150,000 civilians who were arrested in Smyrna and an unknown population from other areas of Asia Minor were massacred, apart from the 320 people. The remaining 18,000 were prisoners of war. That is, half of those arrested. The figure is very impressive, and it is also impressive that we do not talk about it. Finally, on the 31st of August, the firing of Smyrna took place. Apart from the Turks, all the others agree that it was voluntary, that it was purposeful, and that it was guided by the Turkish army. However, there were massacres of populations in the rest of Turkey and in Pontus. And the victims are estimated to be around 500,000 people. Following this data, it becomes clear that there have been mass exterminations directly through massacres or by submitting them to conditions. The annihilation was systematic, and they were against the civilian population without any discrimination. And the intention was expressed at the highest level by Nureddin, the governor of Smyrna, and of course the attitude of Turks in the Melet Aburu. So it is crystal clear that there was a genocide of the Greek population, which was focused on the areas where from 1819 until 1922 were under Greek government, Greek governance. And the genocide was accompanied by full ethnic cleansing of the Hellenic, the Greek, and the Armenian elements. Now I come to the counter-argument. Whatever happened to Asia Minor was the result of a bloody war in which Greece was also a part, in which Greece was also to blame. A similar argument was used in the area of Bosnia-Herzegovina against Yugoslavia in the International Tribunal in The Hague. And the International Tribunal had stressed that It is nowhere concluded that the prohibition of genocide depends on the conditions under which it takes place. Genocide is prohibited absolutely. It cannot be assumed anywhere that it can be permitted. The issue is whether the acts that constitute a genocide are executed, not whether the conditions allowed for a genocide. Therefore, it is completely indifferent and irrelevant whether the genocide of the Greeks in Asia Minor was a fatal consequence, it was a vengeance of an expression of the wrath of the Turks. Based on this rationale, the peoples of Europe, following the end of the two world wars, could proceed to a full genocide of the whole German population and be completely happy about it. It would be their wrath expressed, it would be their vengeance. Apart from legally indifferent, it is also irrelevant that Greece had started first the battles. In the first case, after 1913, the Young Turks systematically start the violent deportation of Greeks towards the interior of the country. The decision, the order was issued in November 1914. Although this was not extended to the city of Smyrna, it was in Aidini. All the areas from Samos to Troy and areas in Eastern Thrace, the Greek populations were deported or fled to Greece to escape. So the genocide starts in the time of Young Turks, and in some cases, the deportations are accompanied by mass massacres, as in Phokia in 1914. Now let me go to the second point. We say that the deportation of Greeks in Asia Minor took place in the context of the agreement on the exchange of populations. Indeed, in 1923, in July, we have this treaty on the Convention on the Exchange of Population. However, be careful. The mass exodus of Greece and the massacre has already taken place. It does not take place in July 23. Already in September 22, the genocide has taken place. The agreement on the exchange of the population was based on the fact that these people had already come to Greece. They did not come to Greece as a result of the exchange of population. The Pontus Greeks, those who survived, came to Greece as a result of this agreement. Third point, atrocities conducted by the Greek army. It is true that the Greek army, between 1922, proceeded to atrocities against the Turks. This is true. We have various events. The events during the arrival of the Greek army in the city of Smyrna, which led to the constitution of a special commission to examine these events. It is also true that destructions of Turkish villages took place during the advance of the Greek army in 1921, and destructions, putting to fire of infrastructure during the withdrawal of what remained of the Greek army after the disruption of the front in 1922. But to ascertain whether there is a genocide, we need to ascertain whether there is an intention for partial or total destruction, extermination of the specific group. So we need to see what is the official position of the Greek government at that time. We have a lot of data on those issues. The most characteristic one is a name which is connected to a very contradictual personality, Steriadis in Smyrnis. Steriadis remained in Smyrna despite the animosity between the Venizelians and the followers of the king. He was accused that he was very strict against the Christians, whereas he was very lenient with Muslims. If the representative of the Greek governance in Smyrna follows these tactics, it means that it was not an intention coming from above. Moreover, there have been war crimes executed by simple soldiers or their officers. But as long as there was an organized government in Asia Minor, they condemned these events. In order to understand the difference, the distinction of these war crimes is that with a genocide, we have the executions of Greeks by Germans during the Second World War, which is a war crime, with the extinction of Jewish community in Thessalonica. In the first case, we have a war crime, serious war crime. In the second case, we have genocide, which is the most serious of crimes. I have also heard many times that we don't have in the case of Greeks a similar order as the order of Talat Pasha. I think we have the order of Hayreddin Pasha, which for Smyrna 1922. Ladies and gentlemen, in concluding, because I have exceeded the time allotted to me, it is clear that the term which will continue to describe the events in 1922 will be what we use in Greece, Asia Minor disaster. It will not be the term genocide. However, this term, Asia Minor disaster, is something bigger than genocide. It includes genocide. Genocide existed. Genocide took place. The knowledge of the events is not just the genocide. It is the full disaster. It's the ethnic cleansing. It's the violent deracination of the people. All this that is included in the term Asia Minor disaster. This is something much bigger than the term genocide, according to us. Ladies and gentlemen, a few weeks ago, Turkey invaded Syria with the intention to establish a 30-kilometer wide zone in an area of 400 kilometers along the Turkish-Syrian borders. The intention was to establish in this area Sunni Arabs, saying that they can establish themselves there in cities or villages. 2 or 3 million people was the intention. What they did not say, of course, Turkey did not say, is that their establishment would mean the ethnic cleansing of Kurds, Alevites, and some other Christian communities, Yazidi, and all these groups of people. Turkey does this because it has not gone through the process that Germany went through following the Second World War. In Western Germany, for many decades, they have been self-castigated and flagellated in order not to do this again. It is not by chance that in Western Germany, they had this lesson, what they did in the Second World War. So the neo-Nazis have a very, very low percentage. In Eastern Germany, they did not teach these lessons at school. They thought that as communists, they had escaped this risk. And therefore, in these areas, we have the Nazi parties, which reach percentages of 10 to 12%. But Turkey did not go through this process. And this is something that we are going to find in front of us continually. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ, κυρία Συρίγο.